As I said, there is a referendum also of equal importance. I suspect of much greater importance long term than this general election will be to New Zealand, at least to Australia. It has shades of but only shades of our cultural and ethnic debate to do with the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. And the Australians are a long way from getting to there. But mind you, the Aborigine population is a lot less. The First Peoples of Australia, as they're called, not just Aborigine, but also Torres Strait Islanders. Their referendum on the yes or no, we've talked about on the show before. And about a month ago, you remember I had Peter Fitzsimons, who was adamantly a yes proponent, the Australian rugby commentator and political commentator for the Sydney Morning Herald. And certainly the Sydney Morning Herald, probably Australia's leading newspaper, have been very, very strong in terms of advocating for yes. And it's an issue in which almost everybody, it seems, except Australian film stars, actually, have opined and funded. Joining us to give a New Zealand perspective is a former National Party operative in this country, a very successful businesswoman in Australia, and a dear personal friend, Jaqui Lane. And she joins us from Sydney. You're in Sydney, Jack?
Yes, I am.
So how long have you been in Sydney now? You've been resident over there since, when did you go? Late 80s?
Oh, yeah, 1987.
Yeah. And you have been involved on the fringes of politics yourself over there. You set up your own publishing company in Australia, a very, very successful one, and got very involved in also the commercial community of Australia too. How would you say your politics from a New Zealand perspective lean over there? Are they more conservative than we are, or are they just different?
Yeah. No, look, they're very similar. I would typically be seen as a Liberal Party voter. So our Liberal Party is equivalent to what I call the old National Party. And so that's where, typically I would have sat. Australia is still very, made two major parties, Liberal Labor. There have been some third parties, the Greens and others. The last election was a major change, though, because we had a strong independent movement come through. They are known as the Teals. However, they are actually independent candidates in seats. They don't form a coalition. They sometimes come together on particular issues, but are not a strong party or even strong link, really. I actually resigned from the Liberal Party and supported the independent person in my local electorate at the last election. So that gives you a bit of a heads up on what's changing here.
Yeah, you've also got preferential voting over there. We've got proportional representation here. Does that lead to something different, or is it just that you've got so many states as well, federal government, to graft onto that too?
Yeah, great point. So we also have, we've got preferential voting, but we also have two houses. So we've got a Senate, and so you have the directly elected MPs, who stand in seats, and then you have a whole Senate structure, which is the preferential voting part of it. So the direct election of MPs definitely results in a very either-or choice, and makes it extremely difficult for third parties to really get a look in at all. And we've had the Australian Democrats in the past. The Greens have been there, but very minor. One Nation, but they, Clive Palmer's a little tilt at things, but it makes it very hard for a strong third party to come in. And so really you might get a bit of differentiation in the Senate, but again, it's very two-party focused until the independent movement came through.
And do you see a future for the independent movement, or is it just that unique set of circumstances for that election?
I certainly hope there's a strong future for them, because having looked at, I guess, the way Australian politics has really descended into very basic name-calling and a really bad policy outcomes, that I think the independent movement is the way that we are going to get more effective governance and policy, and certainly hoping that in the next election we have that there are more independents, so that you break that really strong two-party outcome, which I don't think is serving Australia well at all.
Well, New Zealand has made that choice, as you know, Jack, back in 1993 when we voted for proportional representation. We reaffirmed that 20 years later, so it's been reaffirmed as the preferred. Is there a move to that kind of electoral reform in Australia?
Look, I don't think no one really talks about it at all, quite frankly. I try to explain to people, having come out of New Zealand in that process of MMP and the benefits of it. I don't think anybody here really has any appetite for that at all. So I think, as with others, the rise of the independents is our answer to that in a way.
Yeah, I can see that would be too. All right, now we're talking about The Voice today. I must admit, I'm sort of surprised looking from outside. But first of all, let's talk about the question that Australians are going to be asked on Saturday, and it reads as this: a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And presumably you vote yes or no to that. Is that right?
Correct.
There's not an awful lot of detail there.
And there you have it. Gosh, you got to love these straight-talking Aussies. There is actually further detail provided, but if you're not inclined to search or understand what that further detail is, you have hit on a key issue around the campaign. And when you get to some of the detail, and I've got some of it here, the chapter of the Constitution that they're looking to change is Chapter 9. And that when I add a new section, and bear with me because there's a couple of really important points here, is that it says that in recognition of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Voice. The Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Mm-hmm. The Parliament shall, subject to the Constitution, have the power to make laws with respect to matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. Got that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean...
So effectively, the people are voting for a voice, which will be a body.
Yeah.
Called the Voice.
Yeah.
Undefined, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures.
When this all started, Jack, that concept, though, of the voice was very popular. I think I saw the original polls, but suggested almost by a majority of 2-1 that Australians were not upset with that idea, and the idea that But as I'm just looking at the most recent poll that shows, I think it's a news poll dated October the 8th, that shows the yeses 34% and the noes 58%, which is a huge gap. Why did Australians go from yes, I think over 60%, to this latest poll? Is that one of the reasons, the lack of detail?
That is one of the key reasons, the lack of detail. So just go back a bit. So even now, there are people who absolutely support a voice for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, but do not want the constitutional change. They want it to be through legislation and not constitutional. So that is a huge... That's why you're seeing a big change in those numbers. And it's so from the non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people and themselves. So you've got Aboriginal, the Black Sovereignty movement, who is totally opposed to the voice, is voting no, because they want treaty first. So
they want something like the Treaty of Waitangi.
Absolutely. So they do not want yet another non-specific, another organisation, bureaucracy, made up of whoever, however, that is not representative of all peoples. So they're voting no and campaigning very hard for that. The white, for want of a better description, no vote is around the lack of clarity around what the voice will do in the Constitution, and therefore, and a whole range of other things. So they're voting no. And the yes vote is, this is a good thing to do because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here have appalling outcomes on any measure, and nothing's worked to date, so let's try something new. Is where, so you've got people, on both kind of sides of this, now that the detail has come out.